Hi there. In this video, we're going to learn how to use the gradient tool. We're going to learn what the gradient tool is, how to use it, how to use it on selections, how to use it on text, how to use it on logos and objects, and how to use it on photos as a filter. So let's get started. Let's begin by creating a new document. I'm going to go for the usual 1920 by 1080 pixels. Click on create. Once you get into the workspace, you can find the gradient tool towards the middle of the toolbar, as you can see right here. Or you can press G. Notice how the cursor changes. Now let's begin by defining what the gradient tool is. So the gradient tool is used to create smooth blends between colors. Basically, it creates smooth transitions. Let's create a new layer. I'm going to demonstrate how the gradient tool works. We're going to name it gradient. As we have the gradient selected here, let's drag. As you can see, a blend of the colors are formed, which is in this case black and white. Now, how much you drag determines the proportion of the colors that is between the two colors, and also how hard the transition is. And you can also determine the angle of the gradient according to the direction by which you draw the line. Now, as we go to the top menu bar over here, you can find different options. We'll do them one by one. As you can see, the one we've been working with so far was a linear gradient. Also note that when you press shift and drag, the line will snap to 90, 45 and 180 degrees, like so. So that was a linear gradient. The next is a radial gradient. Now what the radial gradient does, it creates a circular gradient, as you can see right here. The next one is the angular gradient. This is the gradient so formed. Next one is a reflected gradient. Let's drag. As you can see in this case, secondary color comes on both sides of the primary color. In this case, which is white, it comes on both sides of black. And then there's a diamond gradient. Creates a diamond-like pattern, like so. Those are the different types of gradients which you can select on the top menu bar here. Now let's talk about this box right here. If you double click on it, a dialog box opens. In this you can find various presets for the gradients. Now the one we have selected right now is the foreground to background. Now what's good about this is determined upon the foreground color and the background color. What if I was to select a red, and here I'm going to select an orange, and I'm going to drag it out, wait, and drag it out. See how the color changes in this top menu bar, and also the gradient so formed. So that's how the foreground to background gradient works. Now let's take a look at the other presets as well. If you drag through, you can also find various other presets. But towards the second half of the dialog box, you can see various other settings. In the name box, you can create new gradients and name them however you like. I'm going to name it gradient 1. Now the next option below the name box is a gradient type. There are two types of gradients in Photoshop. One is solid and the other is noise. Solid gradients create the smooth transitions and blends between colors, like the ones we've seen before. and noise gradients create rough transitions between the colors. It's more harder. Let's show demonstrations of both. Click on solid and OK. When I drag them up, it's a normal gradient as the ones we've shown before. Let's click and select noise. Click OK and drag that out. You can see how much of a rougher gradient it is and how many more colors there are. So that is the different types of gradients in Photoshop, solid and noise. The next option is smoothness. This determines the smoothness of the gradient. Now below that is the most important part in the gradient editor. This is known as a gradient or color slider. This shows the different colors that are there on the gradient. You click on these small boxes. The bottom ones signify the color and the location of these colors, as you can see. The top ones determine the opacity, as you can see. We'll explain them more in detail. If you click on the bottom ones, you can change the colors by double clicking here, or you can also double click on this and you can change the color. You can also change the location by sliding this, or you can slide the stop itself. These are known as the color stops. This can be done on both sides. You can add more color stops by clicking anywhere on the bottom part of the slider. As you can see, you can add multiple color stops, as many as you want, as shown here. Cancel. Now as you can see in the middle of the gradient slider, you can see the small diamond shape. This is known as a midpoint. The midpoint determines the flow of both the colors in the gradient, basically the proportion between the colors. If I drag it to the left, the color on the right will be more than the color on the left, and the opposite happens when I drag it to the right. I'm going to place the location of this back to 50. Click OK. When you click on the top picker, this is known as the opacity stop. You can change the opacity of the color by sliding this slider, as you can see right here. Now let's create a couple more color stops in between the gradient. And place a yellow and a green. Click OK, and this will be the gradient so formed. These are the basics of the gradient tool that you should know. Now that that's done, we'll move on to the uses of the gradient tool. Now one of the main uses of the gradient tool is to create backgrounds. And you can do that the same way that we have created all the gradients that we have done so far, by simply dragging, and there you have it. There's your background. Another use of it is to use it on selections. So for this example, I'm going to take a marquee tool, I'm going to drag out a rectangle, I'm going to take the gradient tool, and I'm simply going to drag. As you can see, it is only applied to the selection and not anywhere else. You can do this with all the selection tools. I'm going to take the lasso tool, and I'm going to drag out a random shape. When the selection is found, I'm going to take the gradient tool again, I'm going to drag. See, it only applies to the selection. I'll show you an example where this becomes necessary. Here we have one of the images we created using the marquee tool. I want to make some modifications to this image though. See, I don't like how the screen is looking on this. I want to make it more vibrant. So for this, we're going to use the selection tools and the gradient tool. First, let's create a duplicate of the background. Control J. Let's hide it. And now I'm going to take the rectangular marquee tool. I'm going to make sure that it's aligned to the black screen. Once I've drawn out a proper selection, I'm going to go to the gradient tool, select the gradient editor, and I want to choose this color. Click OK, and I'm going to drag up. See how that brings a change? You can see the difference by hiding the other layer, as you can see right now. After doing a bit of editing, this is what I ended up with. And this is how you can use a gradient tool on selections. Now another way to use a gradient tool is to apply gradients on text. Let's see how this is done. I'm going to select the text tool and I'm going to type out a word. Let's say gradient. Click the check mark. I wanted a line, so I'm going to press Ctrl A, go to the move tool and click on align horizontally and align vertically. Once that is done, I'm sure there are multiple ways to do this, but I'm going to do it this way. You can right click on the layer and select rasterize type. Then you can press Ctrl and hold it while you're on the thumbnail. The cursor changes like so. Then just click on it. As you can see, a selection is formed. I'm going to choose a gradient tool now, and I'm going to drag it. See how that gradient is formed? And this is how you apply gradients on text. After a bit of editing, this is what I came up with. You can also apply gradients on PNG images and logos. So for this example, I have this picture right here. It's very simple to do this method. All you have to do is hold Ctrl and click on the thumbnail like we did before. See, this creates a selection. I'm going to take the gradient tool again. I'm just going to create a new layer. I'm going to click and drag. As you can see, the entire image has changed. You can see the difference. You can do this on all types of PNG files and logos. The last method we're going to use a gradient tool is by using it on images, and in this case we're going to use it as a filter. So first, let's begin by creating a copy of the layer, hiding it. Then let's create a new layer, and on this layer we're going to draw our gradient. Let's go to the gradient editor. I'm going to choose a red and a blue. Click OK. Select the gradient tool and drag out the gradient. In this state, you might be confused. But that is where this bar, this menu bar on top of the layers panel comes to use. This contains different blending options. You can go through the entire list and find out which suits your photo. I'm going to go with the overlay on this one as it looks best on my photo. And this is the end result that I come up with. It looks pretty good. So in this video we discussed about what the gradient tool does, how to use it, and the different methods we can put it to use.